Good afternoon and evening, everyone. Welcome to the April CEPA career panel. We're very excited. This is one of our first career panels where we've kind of looked at these alternative routes for the CEP in terms of different career opportunities. Primarily in the past, we've looked at kind of those mainstream pathways for the CEP. But our goal is we really want to provide some insight into some additional career pathways, opportunities, things to do. We want to hear from each of our panelists about what does their day-to-day look like? How does being a CEP help them be successful in their role? How did it help them get to their role? What does that job kind of look like? And how are they able to be successful in their career pathway? And how did our field help them get there? We're spanning across different careers within our field, everything from academia, some nonprofit work, corporate wellness, and clinical research. Our introductions are going to be kind of given by each of these panelists. So I'm going to let them kind of take that away with that. We're going to start with Mary. And again, our three questions for them to kind of start for their intro are, what do they do? Kind of telling us where they work, a little bit about their job description. How did being a CEP get you to where you are, and how does it help you be successful in your day-to-day job? And then what does that typical day-to-day look like? So Mary, you can take it away.
Thank you. And I'll apologize off the bat. I am in the Denver airport, so I still wanted to be able to participate, but scheduling got a little hectic, so just easier to take it from here and still hop on my plane here shortly. But anyway, my name is Mary Hitty. I am a clinical trial manager. I work for a company called MedPace, which is a contract research organization, which you'll see we basically act as the middleman between a pharmaceutical and device company between the site where the research is actually being conducted. So I help manage everyone who's on site, as well as working with a pharmaceutical company to make sure they're conducting their research ethically, according to guidelines, so that as they go for FDA approval, EMA approval, we have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed and everything was done the way it should have been to prove that this drug or this device is actually beneficial and efficacious before it goes to a full board. So it's a little bit of a different career path than I think you would expect coming from a CEP. I kind of took a unique trajectory and started with, I did my master's in clinical exercise physiology and worked in cardiac rehab and oncology rehab. And it was there I really fell in love with the oncology population specifically. So I actually ended up taking a role following my master's in clinical research, working as a clinical research coordinator in oncology clinical trials at a hospital. So I was at the University of Illinois at Chicago for 2 years, working directly with patients who are on clinical trials and doing all the logistics of following this protocol, enrolling patients and ensuring that they're following the proper protocol required elements in addition to their standard of care treatment, and really fell in love with research in general. So then I ended up going back for my PhD, and I did that in human bioenergetics. So I was back in the exercise world, but more specifically exercise in oncology patients. And so what really got me to where I am now is I really just love the logistics of research. And for me, I honestly went into my PhD thinking, I'm going to go into academia. I want to teach. I want to write grants. And it wasn't until I was in it and doing it, and I realized during my PhD, I didn't like teaching as much as I thought I would. I really thought I would love it, and I just didn't. And then I went on and finished research, and I was still kind of on the fence about, do I want to go into more of an industry position? Do I want to still try and do academia and just be more in the medical school where it's all research, no teaching? So I went and did a postdoc. And for me, it really just came down to that I loved the logistics of research, and being a CEP and taking the path that I did, I learned all the ins and outs of, especially because in the past 5 years, even exercise studies have adapted to the guidelines that clinical studies follow. And so I went into my PhD, and my advisor was like, I don't know all these random rules that apply to drugs but don't really apply to exercise. And so I was able to help kind of bridge that gap. And now I really just like working through the logistics of research, and being a CEP helped me with that just because it gives you that personal connection of I don't work directly with patients anymore, but I understand the patient experience. And it's when you're trying to explain things to a sponsor, so someone higher up in a pharmaceutical company, if you can't do that, you can give a kind of a personal background of like, this is what these patients are experiencing. This is why it's not possible for them to come in and do this long list of things that you want for your protocol. I was like, you have to remember these are people. Like, we can't ask them to do more than they're able to do or willing to do. So you have to really help them pick what is essential for your protocol. What can people do who are, I work in hematology and oncology studies exclusively. So helping them develop a protocol of what is actually within the realm of ability for these patients. So having that patient experience working as a CEP was really beneficial. And then in terms of on a day-to-day basis, it really is really variable. I wake up every day and I have a to-do list, but it typically goes to crap by 9 a.m. Because you're just continually fielding questions from, I work on a study right now that's in 26 different countries. So while I'm asleep, I wake up to an inbox from questions from China and Singapore and Australia. And so you're just fielding those questions from these sites and from these research associates that are like, hey, we don't know what to do about this. This patient had this go on. What do you do? So that's what I really love about my job is every morning I wake up and I log in my computer and I don't really know what I'm going to be dealing with that day. And it's really fun for me to be able to troubleshoot those things and work through, okay, we're under the EMA now, not the FDA. Like, what's the appropriate approach for dealing with this patient under European guidelines versus if they're in the United States and they're like, okay, we have to do this based on what's the FDA going to want to see, like, and managing patients in that way. So that is what I do.
Thank you so much, Mary. I even learned a lot more about what is the clinical research behind the things that we do and the things that we see in the research we need. So thank you. Again, if you have questions, please throw them into the chat as we get through kind of our intros, then we will go into those questions. So send them throughout. Next, we are going to go to Rebecca Kappas.
So I am the academia person. And so I'm kind of, in a way, the opposite of Mary, where Mary was like, I didn't really enjoy teaching and I wanted to kind of do more research. And I was the opposite, where I really do enjoy the teaching part of academia. I am an associate professor at Appalachian State University, and I started my position here in 2015. It is not an R1, and my appointment is teaching, research, and service, and that's a 40-30-30 split. So that means 40% of my job is teaching, 30% is research, and 30% is service. I will say that's probably not totally what my effort goes into, since I do teach 3 upper level graduate courses each semester. So I do spend a lot of time on my teaching. But I've been here since 2015, and I was hired specifically because I was a CEP. So they were looking for someone who could teach the clinical classes specifically. I was the only CEP, and I was the only one who had patient experience. During my master's, I did do cardiac rehab, and that's when I got my CEP. So that was back in 2010 when it was still the CES. And so I've had it for quite some time. And I did work clinically for a little bit, but I really decided to go on and do my PhD. And I chose not to do a postdoc because I did want to teach. I really enjoyed working with my students and I enjoy the research, but I was a highly anxious person, and therefore I didn't want the stress of getting grants and publishing and that to kind of fall on my shoulders and potentially get fired if I couldn't pull it off. So I really like that. I don't have that pressure. And so I am a big fan of the teaching aspect. I do teach pretty much all the graduate clinical classes. So I really need my CEP and my background for that. I can really speak a lot to patient experiences from my clinical work. During my PhD, even before I got this position, I used my CEP all the time because we did a lot of research with clinical populations, and I was able to do clinical exercise tests, and we did exercise prescriptions. And so I did a lot of work with clinical populations that I probably couldn't have done without having the knowledge and the background that I did. My advisor felt confident in my knowledge, and therefore I managed a lot of that stuff on my own. And here now in academia, I'm able to use my CEP pretty much every single day. So I use it as I'm teaching and developing coursework. I utilize it for my research because I do research with some clinical populations. I do a lot of outreach in the community. We have a rural population and we have a lot of clinical issues in the area. And so I do a lot of outreach through our interprofessional clinic, part of our institution here. And for my service, I'm also on the IRB, so the Institutional Review Board, which oversees all of the research for the institution. So everyone that collects data and does research at app, we have to look through it and make sure it's ethical and there's no harm to the participants. And so a lot of the clinical ones come my way and they rely on my expertise in that. And then for a typical day in my job, there's also not really a typical day. My only day that's pretty consistent is the day I teach. And so I teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays right now, and that's pretty consistent for me throughout both the fall and the spring semester. So I teach all day from 8:30 until 1. I have 3 classes in a row. And I get to kind of have flexibility with my Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So I do my service, I do my research, I do my writing during that time, I meet with students. And so the one thing I really love about being able to work at an institution like this is that I do get so much hands-on work with my students. And my research is there to help the students learn clinical skills and to get hands-on skills working with various populations. And so that's really enjoyable for me as well. And so I'm able to utilize my CEP in that way too.
Thank you, Becca. And one quick question for you. What was your PhD in?
So my PhD, I got it at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and it was kinesiology, nutrition, and rehabilitation. So that was the name of the department.
Perfect. Thank you. The next person we're going to go to is Catherine Kern, and her primary role is in the nonprofit area. So take it away, Kate.
Can you all hear me? Okay, for whatever reason, I can't mute, so. So I'm Kate. I just recently defended my dissertation at Marquette University. My department is exercise and rehab science. We're within the Department of Physical Therapy. I did my master's in clinical exercise physiology, and our clinical internships, we got to choose where we went. So I ended up at a rehab hospital in Chicago, primarily doing outpatient neuro rehab. So we worked with anyone from stroke, Parkinson's, MS, spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury. And that was my first big look into neuro rehab. And I just found it really fascinating. So COVID happened and I ended up starting my PhD at Marquette because I was interested in research. But I really, really missed working with people. We had participants in and out of the lab, but it was nothing like I was used to in a clinical setting. So I started volunteering at a local community-based gym for people with multiple sclerosis. And I was very attracted to this group because I've always worked in adaptive sports or volunteered in some sort of capacity. And these folks were doing weekly bike rides around the lakes in Wisconsin. And I just wanted to hang out with them and get some interaction with people. So I volunteered with them for about 2 years. And then last year, when I started having the existential crisis of what do I do with this degree, um, I had this thought of pitching the idea for them to hire me. And they don't have any employees at the nonprofit currently. It's all volunteer run. And we have a lot of volunteers who help out. So I talked to the board and the person who runs the gym, who also lives with MS, and they were super excited to take me on. I was able to give them about 10 hours a week for the past 6 months, and I serve as their director of neuro exercise. So what that means is I help run individual exercise programming and group exercise programming for about 100 members with MS. We only operate 2 days a week in the mornings on Wednesdays and Fridays. So in this moment, we don't serve anyone who is working, which is unfortunate. I'm hoping to change that within the future. And I help do a number of other things. Going into the nonprofit world is very new to me. So I'm learning how to fundraise, write foundation grants as opposed to academic grants, do a lot of scientific communication to investors. And I do a lot of scientific communication to our members as well. So I'm talking to two different populations or audiences in that way. But our group and anyone who has MS, you may know someone, they're very focused on how they can help themselves. And I've worked in the cancer population, and I do think that population is very motivated to change their lifestyle factors, but it's nothing like I've seen with the MS group. And it's awesome for me to work with them because they're so easy to talk into doing exercise or not smoking cigarettes or trying to change something for the positive. So I give them monthly scientific research reviews, and they love hearing about what's going on in the field. My role will add more hours once I graduate in May, so I'm going to do a number of additional things like collect outcome measures. We're hoping to run some small scale research studies in partnership with other local institutions, and then make goals for our yearly day of endurance, which is where everyone picks a goal and they come out to the park for the day and they do that thing, whether it's an Ironman or just walking a few feet in their walker. That internship experience that I had in my master's was vital to working with neurologically impaired or individuals with neurological conditions. I understood how to do transfers, participate in safe exercise programming for people who are a huge fall risk, have spasticity or other sorts of impairments, and just how to get creative. I had to get so creative in that internship, and I use that creativity all the time now. I try to turn everything into a game, especially with this group of people, and they love playing games with each other. So a typical day to me, I'll echo the last two ladies, is it's very different. I helped someone apply to Social Security disability the other day because they've gotten denied for the past few years. I run group exercise programming and individual programming, and everyone presents differently every day, which is really frustrating for for those members, but it's a reality of the condition that they have. And right now I'm trying to build my role. So I'm having to pitch a lot of ideas to the board and see what sticks and try it out. Sometimes I'm assuming it'll work, sometimes it won't. But I'm in a huge growing phase within my position now. And I foresee doing a lot more with fundraising in the future too.
Wonderful, Kate. Thank you. One thing I like about that role, and I experienced in my own, is sometimes the role doesn't exist. So being aware of the different fields that we can fill, being aware of our own skill set and taking that clinical skill set and pitching it to someone else can provide a lot of great opportunities. So thank you. And our last person for our bio of those first three questions is Kelsey. And then we will kind of go through questions in the Q&A as well as some additional ones that we think could be some fun things to ask our.
Wonderful. Thank you. I am senior manager of wellness right now for a large healthcare system in Fairfax, Virginia. So it's a Nova Health system. And I have a couple of hats within the health system. We run wellness for the entire employee base. So we support them with all well-being resources, which is a huge umbrella as of the last couple of years with well-being and wellness at the forefront. And then we also do that for our community and our corporate clients. So we have a health and wellness coaching program. We have a fitness program, which is both clinical, community, and corporate. And then we also have kind of like a health screenings department where we run health fairs and team building activities, wellness seminars. And so we supply that for all of our employees as well as our corporate clients. And this could be anything from private corporations where we're coming on virtually and providing them with some kind of wellness seminar, from exercise, nutrition, ergonomics, time management, really anything under the sun in that well-being realm. And then we also put on large health fairs, or we have a lot of team members that will be at the corporate clients full time. So I manage a team of 13 health and wellness coaches, exercise physiologists, and RDs. They kind of all cross over. Some of them have multiple hats in that realm, and a lot of them will sit at the corporate client. So whether it's a county that we have a partnership with, they are the main health and wellness coach or exercise physiologist there. We work with government clients, and then we've worked with school districts. So it's really the whole gambit. And now that I'm in this leadership role, I, have a varied day. So I think that's the theme with everyone on here with all the panels, is that your day does not look the same at all, but that makes it fun and exciting. And so, I wear that manager hat, so constantly making sure I'm there for my team. But it's in healthcare, you are definitely all hands on deck at all times, and we run a little lean. So I do love that I still get to act as an exercise physiologist and act as a health and wellness coach and jump in and teach a class or lead a seminar. And I think that servant leadership has honestly been my, biggest strength, and really helped me to get myself where I am and what I see in all of my team. I think, my background with exercise physiology really started when I got out of school. I did not know what I wanted to do. Some people knew exactly what realm. I liked everything, and I was afraid to go into one thing and pigeonhole myself. So I started in Pennsylvania at Lehigh Valley Health Network, very similar to the health system I'm at now, in more of the medical fitness realm, and was doing some really similar stuff, working with MS and Parkinson's patients and teaching movement disorder classes, working with bariatrics. And so we had a program with the physicians and the exercise physiologists where we had programs that set up before their surgery or before their medical implementations. We also did occupational health work with pre-work screens and fitness tests for them to be ready for their employment. And then working as a personal trainer, strength and conditioning coach. So really saying yes to everything. And that's kind of what got me to where I am. And I think it's also what got me to hiring all the people that I've hired in the past. I probably am a little biased when I see that someone has that background as an exercise physiologist, just because I think, in our field, especially in healthcare, it helps you prove yourself. And there's not a lot of fitness centers that will employ just EPs. And so to have worked for fitness centers that do that, it kind of sets you apart and makes participants feel really comfortable and confident with sound information. But my day is different day to day. We are at different sites, helping with different events. And I do get a little bit of hybrid experience, which is really helpful since COVID. So I guess that would be the one benefit there, but have really loved everything that I've been able to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks again to all our speakers for kind of that very broad and targeted toward the clinical exercise physiology field bios. I think this is a great question for us to start off kind of this generalized Q&A. To the best we can, I will say, kind of speak up and I'll try and help facilitate our discussion around it. But the question that came in is, in your role, do you see many people who make career changes into the clinical exercise physiology space? So maybe someone that wasn't doing it, but then decides that they have an interest in what we do. I think is how I interpret that question, or just see people within the jobs that you're doing switch, to a different job within CEP. So I think there are two different ways we can kind of take that question, but I think both are really good answers to bring up.
Katie, I feel like you could almost answer this question.
I'm definitely happy to pitch in after others have feedback.
I think I've definitely seen, I think in fitness when you're working in a fitness center, whether it's healthcare, that's been my experience. Um, Watching people become so interested in their own well-being. Maybe they didn't come from a family that had that support, that wasn't, their form of education, but then being inspired by what's going on at the fitness center. We've had front desk staff that have stayed on because their goal one day is to go back to school or go to school and become a registered dietitian, an exercise physiologist, something in that realm. And so that's been really inspiring, and I think has helped people grow in that area. And I think especially in healthcare, in order to be respected and to grow, we've made it a credential that you have to be hired in some of those roles. And it's similar to the challenge that registered dietitians have. It's probably a frustration of all of ours at times when there's just personal trainers out there or people that have a certificate that they get within a couple of hours or a couple of weeks. So I think it's a constant battle that we're probably trying to fight. And there's definitely some really amazing candidates that don't necessarily have those initials next to their name. It goes back and forth, but that's been my experience.
Yeah, I think that's really great in answering the question of the way of people getting into the CEP and seeing the value of the education, the certification, because it's going to be more and more required, one, to do the job, and two, to eventually get reimbursement for the job that we do. So that's super helpful in acknowledging all of those things, specifically within your area. To what Kate kind of preluded to in terms of changing roles, I have changed a lot of roles, even though I've been a CEP through my entire career. I finished my master's degree, became a CEP. And since then, I think I've worked at 4 or 5 different places. And I only graduated in 2020. So that's a pretty constant change of careers, sometimes doing multiple jobs at once. But I think, the reason and why I did that and got to that place in terms of changing roles is because a lot of what I saw initially in working in the clinical exercise world is cardiac rehab. And some people are very passionate about working in that space. I currently am employed in cardiac rehab, so I am working in that space. But there's such a wide array of what cardiac rehab can mean depending on different hospitals. A rural hospital, a big hospital in a city, a research hospital, each of those in the way that they practice can look very different. And we're trying to continue to, across the board, make those as best we can. And that's where we have that AACVPR accreditation for programs, to set different programs apart. But in some of the things in, me changing my roles, I think I saw the value of the CEP and I wanted to strive to do something different. Whether that was providing the best services we could to a patient, or making the program the best that we could in a new way, working with a different patient population. How can we incorporate our different pieces of skills and knowledge to bring our field to that level, that each of us is being compensated similarly to some of our other rehab counterparts. And so I think that some of that will come with changing roles. It's asking, this is what my job description is, but I actually think we can do more. Or this is the service we're providing these patients, but I think we should do more. And that's where that building of jobs and descriptions comes from. And so if anyone else has thoughts, otherwise we have some other really great questions. Perfect. The next one is another one also kind of for all the presenters. If you had the opportunity to go into a different discipline within your career, would you? And if so, what would you choose to do instead? So kind of a fun, it piggybacks along that, changing thing, or what things could you maybe change if you wanted to?
I'll start. It's it's kind of hard to say because I took a windy road and definitely had some bumps and was, ready to ditch it all in the middle of my PhD because you're just so overwhelmed and trying to get through it. But I'm really happy of where I am. I love what I do. I'm so glad that I found my way here, and I wouldn't have found my way here if I hadn't done those things. And I wouldn't be as valuable as I am in my position without those experiences and that clinical experience to be able to bring that to the table when trying to make research decisions. And so even though some of it can be really difficult and you want to give up and you're like, this doesn't seem worth it, um, the pushing through and the trying it. And I like to tell students that you don't really know what you like until you try it. Like I said, I thought I would love teaching, and it wasn't until I actually had to teach for 4 years during my PhD that I realized it wasn't for me. You got to kind of learn by trying everything. And you might be really surprised with where you end up. If you had asked me at the end of my undergrad or even at the end of my master's, if I would be in a full-time research role in an industry position, I would have told you you were absolutely bananas, that it would have never been me. But the different pathways that I took and all those hurdles that I went through made me realize what it was I actually enjoyed about the work I was doing, and what were those little siloed things that on their own you don't really understand until it's in the context of the other experiences you have.
There was someone in my department who recently left his postdoc after maybe a month or two because he applied for a job at NASA, and now he's helping to design um, physiologically safe and effective spacesuits for astronauts to go up into space, and helping them figure out how to exercise when they're up there to keep up bone mineral density, prevent atrophy, and improve circulation. So I personally wouldn't want to do that actually, but it sounds like a really cool job. So if I had enough courage, maybe I would apply to something that big. But I thought that was really neat to hear about.
And I will say my postdoc was meant to be 2 years, and I left after a year because I went and I did the experience, and I realized after that year that it wasn't for me. What I was going to get out of my postdoc was to prepare myself for a large academic position at an R1 institution, and I knew I didn't want to do that. In an additional year of a postdoc was not going to prepare me for the job that I'm in now. And I was ready to make that transition. So I think it's important to remember it's okay to pivot. Just because you're like, oh, well, I committed to, I signed on for this 2-year postdoc. If you get in it and you realize, like, talk to your mentors, and I tried to work through it and figure out what it was, but it's not bad if you need to pivot. You have to try things to understand what it is you really like.
To get to some of our other questions, Kelsey or Becca, did you have any particular thoughts to those ones? Things you'd want to do different, or you might just be really happy in what you're doing and where you got.
I agree with Mary that, when you're going through your PhD, I think that there's a lot of times you want to quit. So I agree with the pivoting, but I also agree that there's a certain level of sticking something out. And I think probably if you would have asked me at the time of my PhD, I probably would have been like, I'm going to do something completely different. But now looking back, I really love what I do. it was exhausting to get here. It was exhausting to do my PhD. It was exhausting to get tenure, but I feel very, very fulfilled in my job. So I wouldn't change anything, but it was rough during it. But I do agree with the pivoting if it's really something detrimental to like your being. If it's not something you're enjoying and feel like, well, even, there's going to be bad days, but they're all bad days, I think that could be a reason to kind of switch. And I think, and I agree that I tell my students that all the time, like your path is probably going to be winding, and it's okay to change your mind. You can change your mind at any time. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have. If you want to start over fresh, you absolutely have that opportunity.
I agree with what you just said about, telling your team that you're not going to love what you do every single day. You're not. You're going to do stuff that you don't enjoy. Is there meaning behind it? Do you feel like you still have a purpose? I mean, there's seasons of work where we just feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, but if there's still some passion and meaning behind it, then it's worth it. I came to Inova and kind of transitioned to managing health and wellness coaching and kind of felt like a bit of an imposter. But it just brought me to a different part of the field, and then it grew, and now I'm overseeing fitness again. I definitely missed fitness. I didn't miss the 24/7 lack of work-life balance, but I still get to dip my toe in there. But I would say, grind through that period. You will figure it out and you will find something that works for you. And then, it might adjust, but we go through different eras and seasons of life. And I have a different path. I didn't go and get my master's or PhD. And I had a little bit of FOMO for my other, classmates that did. And I wasn't sure if it would work out for me. And it really did. There was a path that wasn't ever really taught. It was like, oh no, you have to go and get your master's. I just didn't know what I wanted to do yet. And so I didn't go to get my master's because I wasn't sure which realm. And it worked out, but I think it worked out because I just kept saying yes. I was never beneath a certain thing, literally cleaning a treadmill, to then managing people. We still do those things. So I think also just making sure that you're never beneath something. Servant leadership is key. And then just protect your boundaries as well.
I think that even went further than answering that question in the best way possible. A question came in for students interested in pursuing these different areas of work, or those professionals looking to transition. What would you say is an important skill or experience they need in order to be successful?
I can take that just for one of the things I think that stands out, especially now. We're probably all different generations, and I think sometimes people silo you into those generations. That's not true at all. Everyone is just completely different, and I think it's being versatile, making sure that you're versatile, and being diverse. And I think one of my leaders when I started my career, because in healthcare we tend to see layoffs occasionally through different seasons, had said, don't ever let your name be able to be written down on the piece of paper as part of that list. Like, you want to wear many hats so you can do anything. And I think as technology changes too, you don't know what that's going to look like. And so you just want to make sure that you can wear many hats so you're always valuable as a team member.
I'll piggyback off of what Kelsey mentioned, is that she said saying yes to things. Someone asked me the other day, like, should I sign up for this thing? I have a lot going on. And she's a early career researcher. And I just said, I think you got to say yes to things at this stage. And I think that's to go with a lot of early stage career folks, whatever industry that you're in. And that can equate to some poor work-life balance. But I think if you really want to work at something and obtain a leadership role or do something independent, I think it's really important to say yes to any opportunity that really comes your way, so long as you feel comfortable, of course. And I think within my field specifically, you need to have a lot of autonomy. There's not a lot of us that are working within this sector, and you need to be able to make decisions. I don't have a team. I'm myself, and that's it. So It's great to have that kind of autonomy, but it's also pretty frightening that I can make a decision that affects 100 people, and they're going to follow me because they trust me, which is great. Um, but I have to be very confident in those decisions that I'm making.
I'll jump in and give one comment before I have to jump off the call and hop on a plane. I would say just learning and knowing that you are going to work with a lot of different personalities, and you don't have to like everyone you work with. You don't have to be friends with everyone you work with, but it doesn't mean that it's not a productive relationship to have. So learning that how to learning different communication styles. The way I talk to, some of the research associates on my team is very different than the way I talk to, a VP at a pharmaceutical company, and knowing what is the most productive communication style to use to have a productive relationship, and knowing that you won't get along with everyone, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad place to work or a bad company to work with. There's a lot of different personalities out there, and there's benefits to personalities and detriments to personalities, and you have to learn how to work with all of them to be a productive member for your team and to be able to advocate for your team members. So I know that I can step in when I have somebody who is complaining to me that they just can't get through with somebody. I know that I can step in and take over that communication. And so having that skill, I think, is really beneficial, and just learning how to change your tone and your communication type based on the conversation you're trying to have with the people you're having it with.
I was going to throw in also my 2 cents, but I agree with that. But I also wanted to add I guess, kind of having a level of optimism and like being able to play nice in the sandbox, I guess. Just like Mary said, you're going to be working with a lot of different personalities, but the personalities we all love working with are the ones that are flexible, the ones that are, able and happy to help. And I think that that's really important. If you have the time and ability, obviously you want to make sure to maintain boundaries and not be like a yes person. But if you're able to help out a colleague or a student or something like that, being available and saying you're happy to help and, things like that, I think that's really, really important.
I feel like with that being said too, and I look back on my early career and I think, wow, I was really annoying, but that there is red tape and that politics exist. And I wish I was told that earlier on, because I was like, well, why is this not happening? That doesn't make sense. And now in the role that I'm in 10 years later, I'm like, wow, I was probably pretty annoying. I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, which is a good thing. But just remembering that you can work really, really hard. And sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's networking, and sometimes it's just weathering through the storm.
I just want to underscore the networking piece. Everyone who you meet is can help you in some sort of way, but it's up to you to take advantage of that connection. Um, Asking for things that maybe people say no to, and willing to take that risk, I think is worth it most times. Um, and maybe it's just through a connection. Maybe they're not the person who's going to help pull you up to the next stage that you want to get to, but maybe they know someone. So it's good to talk about what you're excited about, because they may know someone who knows someone, and pulling on your network is really important. I'm calling on people who I met 5 years ago, um, to help facilitate some sort of thing in my organization now, and it's really cool. And I've been lucky enough to be in the same place for a few years that I'm able to do that. So I know it helps when you can build that network locally.
Two different people asked specifically whether it was in your school or within your work. If you feel like you're trying lots of different things within the field, but something isn't really working, how do you kind of make that deciding factor to pivot, or I think many of the things with kind of that networking, optimizing, shifting, get you to some of those different opportunities. But, the two pieces of that, are there any additional thoughts to say, when is the for sure time to decide that you have to pivot or do something else totally different? Or, what are those things in trying to get that opportunity where you're like, I am using my CEP, I'm like happy, I'm doing the things that I want to do, and finding those opportunities. We hit on many of them with that last one, but any specific thoughts for kind of those two component questions that go together?
I
I
think
think,
in our field,
oh,
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I actually think that Kelsey kind of spoke a little bit to that about there's going to be bad days. And I think that if you're thinking maybe you do want to completely change what you're doing, I think it's because you're really, really consistently unhappy with your job. You're unhappy going into work. And I would say talk with mentors, talk with people who know you really well, and get their perspective, because they might be able to see something that maybe you are not seeing at the time. So if you have close friends that will be honest with you and say, yeah, it seems like you're really unhappy with your job, that's a pretty good sign. I know for me personally, it'd be nerve wracking to just leave a job if I didn't have something lined up. So I think that that's also a concern. But I think that if you have, some solid mentors to speak with, I think that would be helpful.
That's great advice. I think also in this field, sometimes I'm in Northern Virginia now, and so the salaries are higher, but the cost of living is a lot higher too. But I think in our field, pay is tough at times. I remember being at Pitt, and we had people that graduated come back and speak, and I think I was like, how am I going to live? When they talked about their salaries. I think it's changing, and I think you've got to get creative. I also think there's something to be said about having a side hustle, whether that's picking up using your degree and using your certifications in other ways. And we can do that a lot virtually now. We can do that on the side. So if you are struggling and it's not that you don't really like your job, it's the pay that's really challenging, think about that other side of it. Um, and then I also think sometimes we're very, very passionate. I feel that a lot of us are very passionate about this field, so much to a fault at times, where if you feel like your unhappiness is coming from some of the red tape that you experience at your job, I've had to learn how to be a little less passionate at times, and not in a bad way, but in a way that like life is more important than work, and work is very important and you should be passionate about it, but life matters. Your life matters. And so I think sometimes when you're able to be a little less passionate and care a little less in a good way, it helps you enjoy whatever you're doing, because the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And sometimes it is. You have to decide that.
You have
Wow, I
something to
think
add,
Kelsey's
Kate?
winning
Yeah.
some sort of awards for life advice here. I'll just add that I think it's really good to just talk to people. Like coming to webinars like this and hearing about what else people are doing with their degrees was so important for me. Um, I've had the pleasure to be friends with Sadie and hear about all the crazy ventures that she's been on over the past few years, and that's been really fun and eye-opening for myself. I think it probably in part gave me some confidence to go up and just pitch a cold idea into an organization that never employed someone like me before. Um, and I think it's also important to realize that, like Kelsey said, it's not always greener on the other side. Sometimes there can be changes made within your own organization, but you do have to communicate it and talk to the people who get you, and cozy up with the people who make decisions. It's always good to have uh, colleagues and people on your side who have a little place of power, and come with a reason. It's good to have rationale that benefits both you and the organization, because they're always interested to hear how they can do better. And if it comes down to dollar signs, they'll probably even perk up a little bit more.
I want to briefly touch on this and then maybe hit two more in the next 10 minutes to kind of round out that hour amount of time. We have some fabulous questions coming in, so we're definitely going to have to do more of these. But the question was related to specifically pay, knowing that different states pay less, knowing that different fields pay more. Kelsey's kind of most in the realm. It seems like with that kind of fitness component, you're seeing in your role that some of the maybe people that are underneath you have some of those challenges financially. But specifically, Becca and Kate, with you two being in the more non-traditional roles, do you feel like there have been benefits or also still challenges financially?
So, I was making, I think, 20,000 as a graduate student living in Chicago. So I definitely feel like I learned how to live pretty frugally. So I feel like with my pay right now, I feel very secure financially. Um, I think that's mostly attributed to like my upbringing and just my habits in general. But I will say that the variety in pay for starting associate professors is crazy. I think the starting pay is anywhere from 50,000 a year to like 150,000 a year, and it depends so heavily on the university and your role. So for pretty much the same position, if I was working at, like a Harvard or something, I'd be making substantially more. But it's also weighing the work life balance. I think that for me, the pay is important, but it's not everything. And, could I be making substantially more at a different university? Of course, but at what cost? And for me, it's just not worth it where I am right now in my life. So I feel like I'm making okay money. I'm not making the best. And even amongst other associate professors at Appalachian, I don't think I'm equal to everybody here either, for various reasons, our roles and things like that. But is it enough for me to live comfortably and not be anxious like I was during most of my life leading up to getting a real job now? Yeah, I feel much more comfortable. And I'm just unwilling to kind of accept a higher paying position at the risk of my family and my health and my work life balance.
I can go. At least speaking from the Midwest, I think most CEPs are making anywhere from like $20 to $35 an hour. I think salaried positions are hard to come by if you're working in the clinical space. Um, the way that I based my salary off was my level of education and what a CEP would be making at the higher end locally. But I'm also navigating as I go along, working in the nonprofit sector, that there's only so much money that nonprofits have. And just because you work for a nonprofit doesn't mean you can't make money. But right now, I'm definitely learning as I go along. So just recently, I asked to get a pay bump, and I only work 20 hours a week, so I'll be making 35K. At my other job, I'll also be making 35K. And at Marquette, a new professor, an assistant professor, would be making about 70K. So I feel very comfortable with my salary based off of what I know and what people are getting paid with my degree and specialty. It's hard to ask for sometimes, but you got to know what you're worth, and it's important to have reasons going into a job interview as to why you deserve that money.
You guys are honestly like special ball seeing questions, because one of the other questions I wanted to hit before we finished was where you put like salary, work life balance, and those things. And in your answers, you kind of talked about that. Really thinking about what you're worth, thinking about what's out there, doing some research. Grass isn't always greener on the other side just because of the financial component at things, as well as switching fields. So I think a lot of that, and each one of our speakers has talked about it. It's about looking internally at what your own values are, what your passions are, and then from that kind of exploring. And so I want to kind of finish on a fun question. And that is, what is the most surprising part of the job that you didn't expect? So I think that's a fun one to kind of close out today. And based on the amount of questions we've had, we'll definitely have to do more things like this because it's been a wonderful conversation.
This is a hard one, but it's a good question. I think maybe in the realm of a manager, just because that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years now. It's managing people. I think we've said it a couple of times on here. It's just that everyone is so different, and if leading is a goal of yours or something that you're already doing, don't ever be afraid to hire people that are smarter than you and that challenge you. That is what makes a company better, or a team better. And I think I've seen that in some leaders, and it's a bad quality when they're a bit of afraid to do that. And I think having a diverse population that can challenge you and bring up your weaknesses, because we all have them, is really helpful. And then I also think just people not understanding what our field is and not giving it respect. That's definitely been a fun challenge to try to overcome, and something I'm very passionate about.
This is a tough question as well. I have a lot of surprising things because of my students, I would say. I think that I'm more than just a professor and a teacher. Like I have to learn a lot about different college is different from when I was in school, like the pre-COVID. I mean, even like years and years ago, but now even with the pre-COVID, my teaching has changed so substantially from the pre-COVID days to post-COVID, and the learners have changed so much from pre-COVID to post-COVID. And so like the amount of I have to be so adaptable, and I have to learn about each individual group of student that comes in. And so I didn't expect to have to do so much learning about different generations and we go to so many teaching webinars about how to best structure your classes. And I think when I started off, you didn't think teaching was quite like this. I think you thought it would be easy, maybe not easy, but that it would come naturally, and it doesn't at all. And so you have to learn, how do I best develop my classes to really effectively teach this information to students, versus when I was in college and you just sat in a lecture hall with 400 other people and just took 2 or 3 exams and that was it. So it's very different. So the changing landscape and being able to be adaptable to that, I was not ready for.
Oh, now I can talk. I'll just say that all the different things you can do in the field. I'm just constantly surprised by what jobs people are holding with these degrees, and I think that's really cool.
And that is honestly a great way to end. So I want to thank everyone that attended, sticking with us through the starting technical difficulties, our panelists for staying on an extra 20 minutes to restart over. But I think the whole purpose of us as continuing and bring this together is having some free opportunities we're kind of networking in a virtual panelist way. Having ideas out there, thinking about, what's outside the box, what else we can do, who do we connect with. So we're hoping to have more opportunities like this for students, young professionals, people that are further in their career that have maybe had that passion kind of go away a little bit. Like, what is the next thing, and being okay to say that we want to pivot and do something next. So thank you all for attending. Hopefully the first of many career panels that kind of bring some of these different ideas together. I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and please feel free to reach out to the CEPA continuing education email. If you have specific questions, specific goals for future webinars, or maybe panelists or careers that you want to know about, because we'd love to hear what you want, and then we can bring those opportunities hopefully to you in the future. So I hope everyone has a great night, and we will see you on the next webinar.